then, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a couple of announcements with regards to the defence sector. He dedicated 7 new state-run defence firms, replacing Ordnance Factory Board. They're going to be replacing this over 200-year-old Ordnance Factory Board into 7 full entities, namely Advanced Weapons and Equipment India, Armoured Vehicle Nigam Limited, Gliders India Limited, India Optel Limited, Munitions India Limited as well, and a whole host of other companies as well. So let's talk a little bit more about what to make of these announcements and what does it really mean from a market's perspective. We have with us 2 guests joining in to talk about what to make of these announcements. SP Shukla, the Group President, Defence, Aero, Agri and Steel at Mahindra Group. And we also have with us Maroof Raza, Consulting and Strategic Affairs Expert. Gentlemen, both of you, good to have you on the show. Mr. Shukla, good morning. Let me begin with you. What is it that you're making of these announcements, the 7 new entities that the Prime Minister talked about on Saturday?
Good morning. I think we can look at the whole thing from 2 perspectives. First perspective is, what does it mean for the entities themselves? And 2, what does it mean from national perspective, from the perspective of our country, its security and defense forces? If you look at the first perspective, I think simplest thing to do is to make things easy for everyone, an analogy. No analogy is perfect, but corporatization is like someone, a grown-up child, daughter or son, moving out of the parents' house and staying in a separate house. What does it do? It gives the entity which has moved out of the parents' house full control over its own income and its own expenses. With control comes responsibility. Now it has to independently manage its finances, and therefore responsibility comes. In corporate terms, we call it that it gives to decentralization, better decision-making, and empowerment. So this is the perspective for the entity. It remains government-owned, 100% ownership remains with the government. It is like your parents don't change just because you move out of a house. But when we come to national perspective, it has wonderful implications. First of all, due to empowerment and decentralization of decision-making, it allows better efficiencies to pitch in. Same efficiencies can conceptually and theoretically be realized when you are a board, part of the government literally, but incentive to achieve those efficiencies is much higher in a corporatized structure. Second, 7 different entities now will focus on their separate areas of competencies. You name them. So someone will be focusing on armored vehicles, somebody will be focusing on ammunition, others will be focusing on their respective auxiliary, ancillary systems and supports. As a result, they will be able to pursue their own growth path much better. So these are the 2 perspectives I will share with you at the moment.
Maroof also is with us. Maroof, thanks so much for taking out time for us. You think, a lot has been spoken about imported defense product, a lot has been spoken about Atmanirbharta and defense and how it can be a big sector for exports as well. Do you think this is a part and parcel of that same theme which has happened over the weekend?
You see, we must get one thing clear, that you cannot jump from a country which was completely virtually import dependent to suddenly making everything of consequence yourself. This is a long drawn out process. There are a lot of hurdles that need to be overcome. The first is that the government must give a clear timeline to the services where they can fulfill their immediate critical requirements by importing stuff that we need. Let me give you an example. The Air Force has been complaining for a long time that it's terribly short of fighter aircraft squadrons. Now, we have gone and picked up 36 Rafale aircraft. Much has been made out about it in the news, but what we've got up to now is only 5 odd aircrafts, and more is going to come over a period of time. So, God forbid, if we go in for a conflict with China, which seems quite probable considering the fact that China is not budging from its stand since April last year, then how are we going to make up that deficiency in an immediate conflict situation? The second is that we keep talking about when LCA gets Mark II, then LCA would fulfill all the requirements of the Air Force's shortcomings. But the fact is that the Air Force hasn't yet inducted the full stock of Mark I LCA, and Mark II, you're talking of 2030 onwards. Is the world going to wait for you for 9 or 10 years? I don't think so. So we need to clearly define at the Ministry of Defense level that what needs to be purchased immediately and what needs to be pushed for internal manufacturing and growth. Now, there is another area there, and that is that we need to co-opt the private sector into defense manufacturing and not keep them out of the loop in a lot of areas by saying that is sensitive technology. After all, you buy technology from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, or Rafale from the French, and this is not exactly secret technology in those countries. These companies are private or semi-private. So why can't we have our own industrial giants, whether it's the Tatas or it's the Mahindras or it is Reliance? Why don't you let them completely mesh with the defense public sector undertakings? They seem to be turfs of interest which are being guarded by the bureaucrats, the Ministry of Defense, the DPSUs, who do not want the challenge of the private sector to come into their work atmosphere, which will obviously get them to overall things and the established pattern of work, which has reached a comfort zone, but it's not good enough for India. And the third thing that we need to seriously do is that we need to have certain areas where we can export. Now, we do make good boots, jackets, bayonets, helmets, a whole lot of things, but the whole import procedure is very cumbersome. Let me give you an example. If you got permission to export helmets year 2020, the same helmets need another round of permissions in 2021. So there is so much red tape that people only who are very determined to continue to export will go back to South Block every year for permissions. Why can't we have a more streamlined process and do away with unnecessary bureaucracy which only slows down our efforts? Now, stuff that we make might not be good enough for the P5 countries, which are all the world's top arms exporters, but they are certainly good for countries in Africa, some of the smaller countries in Asia, who cannot afford the exorbitant prices that you have to pay for aircraft, tanks, radar systems,
Right.
missiles, satellites,
Right,
etc. So we've got to get a little real.
Right, Maroof. Understood the point. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time for us. Of course, an important